Hi everyone, today we cover the easy task of showing a picture in our Godot game. Surely there is a node for that, right? Well, yes, but actually there are 5 of them. For one, we have Sprite and Sprite3D, as well as AnimatedSprite and AnimatedSprite3D. And then there's also TextureRect. So which one should we use? Of course, this depends on what we want to achieve. If you've watched the previous part in the Godot Nodes Explained series, you can already narrow it down a bit without knowing the nodes in detail. So the green TextureRect node is a control node, meaning it's used for showing an image in the UI layer. This texture can be loaded from your typical image file, PNG or whatever. But you can also generate this texture procedurally. Just select the TextureRect node and click on the arrow next to the texture entry in the Inspector tab. As you can see, there are a lot of options. Not even I know what all of these do, but there are a few notable ones. Camera texture is an image you get from a camera feed, meaning a real-life camera, like a webcam. Gradient texture is used if you want to have a gradient to sample from. This can be a black to white gradient, a transparency gradient, or even a multicolor gradient. Noise texture is an image made of pseudo-random color values from black to white. Very useful for making stuff look more organic or dirty. And lastly, the viewport texture, which is used to display a 3D scene in Godot from the view of a camera node in a texture. This is very useful for mirrors, or to get back to TextureRects, to render 3D elements in the UI layer. Here's a tutorial on how to do that. Okay, but what if we want to render an image not used for UI purposes? Well, again, take a look at the color. If our game is 2D, the Sprite or AnimatedSprite node is what we want. But if our game works with a 3D environment, Sprite3D and AnimatedSprite3D are what we need. This could be the case if you want to make a classic Doom-like game or can display game elements as sprites instead of meshes. But what about the differences between Sprite and AnimatedSprite? The name seems to give it away. One is used for still sprites, the other for sprites with animation. Though it's not that simple. You are able to do animations with just the sprite node and an animation player node. And honestly, I prefer that method in many cases. Let's talk first about how to use the sprite node. In Texture, you add your image file, and in Normal Map you can assign an additional image for how normals should be applied to the sprite. This can be useful for light and shadow calculations. Then there is the animation subgroup. If your image file consists of multiple frames of animation, you can define the number of vertical frames and horizontal frames in the image file. The frame attribute defines the currently shown frame. Frame coords does basically the same, but instead of an index value, you use actual coordinates in the image file. So Sprite is very easy. AnimatedSprite is an extension of this approach. First, you'll notice we don't assign a texture to the AnimatedSprite. Instead, we need to create sprite frames. Once we click on that, a new tab shows up. Here we can define different animations on the left side, like walking, attacking, etc. Under animation frames, you can add multiple textures from different image files, or a pre-existing sprite sheet from a single file. Honestly, the example for possible file extensions is a bit confusing. I don't know most of these extensions, except of course TRES, which is an extension used by Godot. But don't worry, even though it's not easy to recognize, you can just as well use a PNG file with multiple frames of animation for the sprite sheet. Once you've selected the sheet, you'll need to define the number of horizontal and vertical frames in the file, as well as the frames you want to use for this animation. Then they are added to the animation and you can change their order, etc. That's the big difference between the two. Which one you want to use is up to you. With that, we've covered the most common ways to display an image in a game and learned about 5 different nodes at once. If you like this video, leave a comment, subscribe and/or take a look at the stuff I have on itch.io. Link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching and until next time, bye bye!